Call is patient breathing.
I don't know. No, I don't know. And I went out, and I feel so bad because I went out and I left my mum here, and now this man's got in my house.
Okay, and what's happened to the man at the moment?
He's got blood everywhere.
Okay.
And there's a knife. There's blood everywhere. What am I going to do? Please, can you talk me through it? What do I do? Talk me through.
That is the 999 call made on the evening of 2nd of July 2024 by a woman who says she had just walked into her own home and found a man lying in blood in the hallway floor. Her mother, Helen Shakespeare, would tell the officers who arrived that she had been alone in the house, that the man who forced his way in was Raymond Groves, that he had come at her with a knife, that she had stabbed him to save her own life. For the first 5 interviews she gave to Wiltshire police, that is the story she stuck to. It would take months of CCTV analysis, phone data, and one footprint she didn't know was there to prove that almost none of it was true. Wiltshire police were called to a house in Strawberry Fields, a quiet street in the village of Easterton near Devizes, shortly after 8 o'clock that evening. Inside, officers and paramedics found Raymond Groves lying in the hallway. He was 48 years old and 2 days just past his birthday. He was pronounced dead at the scene. Helen Shakespeare told police Groves had forced his way into the house, that he'd threatened her with a knife, and that she had grabbed a kitchen knife of her own and stabbed him in self-defense. It was her daughter Letitia Goodwin, who lived at the address, who said she had arrived home to find the scene already there. To understand what really happened in that house, you need to understand who was in it and who wasn't supposed to know about the others. Helen Shakespeare and Raymond Groves had been together since 2012. They'd separated by late 2023, though contact between them continued. Letitia Goodwin was Shakespeare's daughter. Groves had effectively raised her, and she regarded him as a stepfather. Though in 2015, she had made an allegation against him that police did not pursue for lack of evidence. By late 2023, Goodwin was living at the Strawberry Fields address with a new partner, Anthony Ilya. That same November, both Shakespeare and Goodwin went to the police with fresh allegations against Groves. A live investigation was opened. Groves was bailed on conditions not to contact either of them. He kept coming anyway, so did they. And through the first half of 2024, as Groves kept visiting Strawberry Fields, and as Shakespeare quietly began seeing him again, the resentment building inside that house had a name: Anthony Ilya. According to the judge who later sentenced them, the plan against Raymond Groves went through more than one version before Hillier decided to finish it himself. In January 2024, Shakespeare and Goodwin exchanged messages about, in their words, getting him. Goodwin talked about slashing his tyres. She arranged for her father to travel down from Lancashire to attack him. That attempt failed. By March, Hillier was losing patience. In a text to Goodwin on the 1st of the month, he wrote, "I fucking told you I would get rid of him." The judge found that by this point, Hillier was already thinking in terms of killing Raymond Groves. Through June, the plan sharpened. On the 18th, Goodwin told her ex-partner by message that her father had told her she had to stab Groves and that she wouldn't get in trouble for it. The same day, Hillier warned her, "You're playing with fire, babe, if you stab him. Your mum can stab him. I'm not having you get in trouble." He offered to do it himself. Goodwin refused. "I don't need anyone to do my dirty work for me." The court found that for a time, Hillier and Goodwin hoped Shakespeare herself would be the one to stab Groves on one of the occasions he took her out alone. There is little evidence that was ever really her intention. 2 days before the killing, on his 48th birthday, Groves visited Shakespeare and the two of them drove out together. Afterwards, Shakespeare would claim he had raped her during that visit. The judge rejected that claim outright, describing it as invented after the fact to justify what was coming. By then, Hillier and Goodwin had stopped waiting for Shakespeare to act. Hillier would do it himself. On 2nd July 2024, Raymond Groves believed he was walking into an empty house to see Helen Shakespeare alone. They had spoken by phone that morning, a 48-minute call just after 9, then a second call lasting roughly 2.5 hours from mid-morning. Groves' partner, Maria Brown, later told the court she overheard part of it, Shakespeare inviting him over and telling him that if he came, she'd drop the allegations against him. That evening, Raymond arrived at Strawberry Fields by taxi. He arrived just after 6:15 that evening. Helen Shakespeare met him at the door. Anthony Hillier was already inside the house, and the court found he had brought a hunting knife with him for the purpose. What followed, the sentencing judge called a brutal, planned attack on an unsuspecting man. Groves was stabbed in the neck, severing his jugular vein and in the abdomen. He had defensive wounds on his hand from trying to fight the knife off. What Hillier did in the next 58 minutes is, in some ways, the most disturbing part of this case. Not because of the violence, but because of how methodically it was carried out. He wiped his own bloody footprints out of the hallway. He changed into a spare set of clothes he brought with him for exactly this purpose. He took 2 phones, Groves and Shakespeare's, so Shakespeare could later claim she had no contact with Groves at all that day. This is Hillier leaving the property afterwards. Goodwin, meanwhile, had taken her children into town with a friend, quietly building an alibi. The plan was for Hillier to collect her, drive her home under the pretext of delivering her mother some cigarettes, and let her discover the scene. At 7:14, Hillier left the house to fetch her. For 5 police interviews, the story held. Then Wiltshire police went back to a neighbour's CCTV, the same camera covering the driveway and the front door you've already seen in this film. It showed Anthony Hillier at the property at the time Raymond Groves died. It showed Helen Shakespeare waiting outside for Groves and letting him in, not being forced in, as she told police. Neither of them knew the camera was there. It wasn't the only thing Hillier had missed. Underneath Raymond Groves' body was a single footprint in blood, left behind when he wiped the hallway. It matched trainers recovered from the Royal Wootton Bassett address where Hillier had been living, trainers he tried to get his landlord to throw away. Then there was the knife itself, placed in Groves' hand to suggest he'd arrived armed. It carried his own flesh and blood. Impossible if he brought it back to attack someone else with. And then there was the phone data. Nearly 3 hours of calls between Shakespeare and Groves that morning, including the one Maria Brown says she partly overheard. Piece by piece, an account that had convinced police on the night it happened came apart under evidence none of the 3 had accounted for. This is Anthony Hillier being arrested on suspicion of murder. Helen Shakespeare, initially arrested for attempted murder, was re-arrested for murder once Groves' death was confirmed. Letitia Goodwin was arrested first for perverting the course of justice, then for conspiracy to murder. All 3 denied it. Hillier gave a no-comment interview. Shakespeare maintained her account of self-defense through 5 separate interviews. An earlier trial, which began in 2024, did not reach a conclusion. It was halted, and the 3 were remanded in custody for a retrial. It would be nearly 2 years before the case returned to court. An 11-week trial at Salisbury Crown Court that concluded in May 2026. On 21st May 2026, the jury returned 3 different verdicts for 3 different roles in the same killing. Anthony Hillier, guilty of murder. Helen Shakespeare, not guilty of murder, guilty of manslaughter. Letitia Goodwin, because she had been found unfit to stand trial due to serious mental illness, the jury did not return an ordinary verdict against her. In what's called a trial of the facts, they determined she had committed the acts that amounted to participating in the killing. Shakespeare's verdict is worth pausing on because it says something real about how the law actually draws the line between murder and manslaughter. Being part of a plan that ends in someone's death doesn't automatically make you guilty of murder. To convict for murder, prosecutors have to prove the defendant intended to kill or to cause really serious harm. During deliberations, the jury sent the judge a note asking exactly that question about Shakespeare's state of mind. Their verdict, reached soon after, reflects the answer. If she only intended some harm, not really serious harm, the correct verdict is manslaughter. The judge accepted that reading of events, that Shakespeare wanted Groves taught a lesson, even physically hurt, but didn't know Hillier had harmed himself with a knife and didn't want him killed. Her participation still made her criminally responsible for his death. It just wasn't murder. Goodwin's case worked differently again. Because she wasn't well enough to take part in an ordinary trial, there could be no finding of guilt in the usual sense, only a finding that she'd done what was alleged. That outcome led to a hospital order with restrictions, not a prison sentence. On 2nd July 2026, exactly 2 years to the day after Raymond Groves was killed, the judge handed down sentence. Anthony Hillier received a mandatory life sentence for murder. Because he had brought a knife to the scene intending to use it, the judge set a minimum term of 26 years before he can even be considered for parole. She found no mitigating factors in his case at all. Helen Shakespeare was sentenced under the guidelines for unlawful act manslaughter. The judge placed her in the lower culpability category, reflecting her finding that Shakespeare hadn't intended really serious harm, but weighed against that the fact that Shakespeare lied to the police across 5 interviews and helped build the false account afterwards. She was sentenced to 5 years with credit for time already served on remand and for a documented history of trauma and complex PTSD accepted by the court's medical experts. Letitia Goodwin received a hospital order with restrictions, reflecting the court's findings that she remained seriously mentally unwell, not that her role in planning the killing was minor. The judge's own remarks described Goodwin and Hillier as the driving force behind the plan to kill Raymond Groves. Raymond Groves' family called him Boo. His sister told the court he was loud, funny, always there. The kind of person, she said, you could hear before you saw him. Maria Brown, the mother of his 4 children, told the court that losing him felt like losing half of herself. What makes this case worth examining isn't the love triangle framing that ran through some of the early headlines. It's what the investigation had to go through to reach the truth. A scene deliberately staged to look like something it wasn't. A story that held up under 5 police interviews and a plan that very nearly worked. It came apart because of a camera none of the 3 knew was there, a single footprint under a body, and phone records that didn't match the story being told. Sentencing Hillier and Shakespeare, the judge thanked the investigating team by name for what she called an exemplary investigation. One built, in the end, not on a confession, but on the small physical facts a carefully planned lie couldn't quite erase.